Okay, before I start, please let's give a big round of applause for Vitaly, Karis, Jarin, Amanda, Iris, Ari, Jan, and all the rest of the team. For putting together this wonderful event. You didn't even know what you were clapping for. Okay, it's an absolute pleasure and honor to finally be here. I remember, I think it was about 8 years ago, I was sitting in this very room in the audience, and I was looking at the speakers and I thought, man, how cool would it be to give a talk here in Freiburg? And now it's finally happening, I'm getting goosebumps. So thank you so much, Vitaly and team, for making it happen, and thank you all for sharing this experience with me. My name is Manuel Matuzovic. I'm a front-end developer from Vienna, and by day I work for the city of Vienna, and by night I'm an accessibility auditor and consultant. And as a consultant, I work with all kinds of clients, small businesses, larger businesses, universities, institutions, and they all have all kinds of different stacks. Some sites run on PHP, others on Python, and others on ASP.NET, whatever that is. Some sites are powered by content management systems like Kirby or Craft CMS, and some sites, of course, use JavaScript frameworks and libraries like Svelte or Vue, and some of the old schoolers even still use React. And when for the first time I worked with a client who had a React stack, I was hesitant to take the job at first, because at that time I didn't know much about React and I just wasn't sure whether or not I would be able to help them with their accessibility issues. And yeah, you know, I considered a few things, I thought about it, and then I was like, fuck it should be fine. I will just learn the basics and it will work. If I just put myself under enough pressure, I should be able to learn the basics in React to help them with their accessibility issues. And a really great way of putting yourself under pressure is to sign up for the CFB at the React conference in Finland, get accepted, and give a talk in front of 400 React developers. On screen is a photo of me at React Finland in 2019. You can see me on stage. My arms are wide open and looking really confident. And in the back are my slides, and you can see the beautiful, beautiful React logo. And when the day came that I worked with the client, it turns out we didn't talk too much about React. We mostly talked about HTML. I mean, we talked about some of the specifics of client-side rendering, like DOM changes and routing, but we mostly talked about HTML because most issues were caused by badly written HTML. And that's something that all of my clients have in common. No matter the stack, most issues are caused by badly written HTML. And the fun thing is, I already kind of knew that, because when I got started with web accessibility in 2016, I read all the articles, every single article about web accessibility and all the books, and I watched talks and videos and I took courses. I just tried to find as much information as possible in order to learn web accessibility. And after 2 years, I shared my experiences and my insights in an article on Elistapart titled "My Accessibility Journey: What I've Learned So Far." And one of the insights was, a solid knowledge of HTML solves a lot of problems. So I already knew that back in 2017, 2018, but I don't know, I just thought that this doesn't apply to my clients, to large companies with many developers who sometimes have more than a decade of experience creating websites, people who create products for use thousands and thousands of users every day. I thought this doesn't apply to them. This only applies to, I don't know, beginners like me at the time. And while I was thinking about the early days when I got started with web accessibility, I also remembered how I started following web accessibility experts on Twitter. And pretty quickly I noticed that they mostly post HTML basics. And I was wondering, why? Why do you post HTML basics all the time? And why do you keep repeating these basics over and over again, year after year? When do you start to post the complicated accessibility stuff, the scary accessibility stuff, the stuff that I was so scared of for so many years that I lied to myself and I told myself, I don't have to make accessible websites. I don't know that stuff. Others have to do that. When do you start to post that stuff? It rarely happened. And now that I have some experience and that I post my knowledge and the stuff that I know on social media, I see myself do the same things. I keep repeating the same basics over and over again, year after year. My friend Max Böck, he's a developer, he once jokingly said that it's fascinating how I was able to build an entire career based on a single HTML element, the button element. On screen is a photo of a beautiful beach in Greece, and someone, absolutely not me, 100% not me, took a giant stick and wrote in large letters, "A div is not a button," into the sand instead of spending time with their family. And I even have a website called the Button Cheat Sheet. It's just a collection of good and bad ways of creating buttons. I didn't expect much of this website, but it got shared a lot. And I guess it's because a solid knowledge of HTML solves a lot of problems. And I'm wondering why. Why is it that after almost 30 years of this language existing, and after almost 30 years of hearing how simple and how easy HTML is, that we are so bad at writing this language? On screen is a photo of the very first HTML document published by Tim Berners-Lee 29 years ago. And this question kept bugging me for a long time, and it still does. But one day, I was in my hotel room, and you can see a photo of Bill Murray in the movie Lost in Translation, sitting on the bed of his hotel room, looking depressed. So one day, I was in my hotel room, and I was thinking about HTML. You know, the things you do in a hotel room. And I was trying to come up with reasons why we are just so bad at writing HTML. And I want to share some of my insights and ideas today with you. And number one, we are not as good at writing HTML as we think we are. And I know what you were thinking. I am good at writing HTML, and some of you probably are. But the majority of us front-end and full-stack developers are really bad at writing HTML. On screen is a code sample we took from a real website. You can see a main element. In this main element is a section. In the section is a header. In the header is a section, an article, a section, a div, an article, and another section nested. And I can say that we are bad at writing HTML because I get paid to assess the quality of websites others have made. I look a lot at HTML others have written. So I do it professionally, and I also have this website called html.dev, where we take code snippets we find on real websites, remove any traces that would point you to the original code because we don't want to blame or shame anyone. So we put these snippets on the site, we explain what's wrong, and we offer alternative solutions. So I do this professionally, and also I do this as I have this shitty little hobby. And on top of that, I'm just not able to use the web like anyone else. I can't just take my virtual board, jump on it, and surf the cyberspace and have a great time and obtain free information and enjoy it. No, I absolutely hate surfing the web. I don't enjoy the web. Whenever I visit a website and I see a dialog pop up and there's a close button, I just have to open DevTools. I have to inspect it and check if it's a button or a fucking div. Because a div is not a button. You can see a photo of me at Beyond Tellerrand in May. Earlier this year, I'm holding a poster that says, "A div is not a button." And we're really bad at writing HTML. And when I say that we are bad at writing HTML, I don't mean the syntax. Like, I don't mean writing an end tag and a start tag and stuff like that. I'm sure that most of you are really good at that. I'm also a teacher. I've been teaching for more than 10 years, and most of my students usually only need about 2 hours to understand how HTML works. So that there is a start tag, there might be an end tag, that you can add content between the start tag and the end tag, and you can also add an attribute and an attribute value to a start tag. But of course, there's more to HTML than just syntax, semantics. Yes, semantics. Semantics are important. But do you know why? Why are semantics important? Do you know why it's important to use this element over that element, or this attribute over that attribute? And how many elements are there in HTML? 20, 50, 100, 200? Some developers might say there are only 2 elements in HTML and that you only need 2 elements. the div and the script tag. And I've seen websites built mostly with these two elements. But of course, there are way more elements. There are about 115 elements in HTML. How many do you know of them? Good question. Paul Foster asked this question, and he created the HTML tags memory test. It's a fun little game. It's highly addictive, so please don't play it now because I have important things to say to you, and I want you to pay attention. But play it afterwards. It's super simple. There's just an input field, a button, a counter, and a list. You add a tag name to the input field, for example, div. You press the button. If it exists, it will be added to the list, and the counter goes down. And I would say if you know 50, you're good. If you know more than 70, you're really, really good. Okay, that was the first reason. The second one is designers know too little about HTML. Now, don't get me wrong, I really don't want to put this on designers, but it's just a reason. It's not the most significant or the most important reason. It's just a reason. And the thing is, I believe that if you're creating products for the web, it's really helpful if you at least understand the basics of the languages your work will be translated to, so HTML and CSS. It helps you professionally because you know more about the possibilities and the limitations of what you're creating, and you can consult your clients better because you know more about the whole process of website creation. And on top of that, it's great for working with a team, so it's much easier to talk to a developer if you speak their language. Okay, this is the second reason. The next one is for all the 10x Silicon Valley, well, actually move fast, break things, JavaScript will one day cure all diseases. Have you tried Tailwind Crypto Bros? And it's, I made it, yes. and it's some people just don't care. Some people just don't give a single flying fuck about accessibility and users. Here's an example. This is the main navigation I found on the website of a pretty well-known front-end JavaScript engineer. And it's someone who has more than 25,000 followers on Twitter, someone who gives talks at conferences, who writes articles, who contributes to open source, and has more than a decade of experience creating websites. And you just can't tell me that they've never heard of semantics or accessibility, or that they have never heard of the A tag, or the consequences a div has when you put a click event on them. And this is not about him, it really doesn't matter, but this kind of people don't care about users. For them, it's all about developer experience, having a great time, making good money. They don't understand the responsibilities they have as web developers. But to be fair, this is the navigation of the old website. They redesigned it earlier this year. This is the new navigation. So instead of all divs, they now have a single div. There are two A elements, which is great, but unfortunately, the content in the A element is wrapped in a button. Okay. The next one. We put too much trust and hope in ARIA. So when I do an accessibility audit, I have all kinds of tools that will tell me if there are bugs on a website or any specific feature. For example, there is one tool that will tell me how many ARIA attributes are on a single page. And if I find a page with, let's say, 200 or 300 ARIA attributes on a single page, I know I'm going to have a really bad time because we are so bad at ARIA. We don't understand that shit, really. We are so incredibly bad at ARIA. We don't know how that stuff works, how the specification works. And this is not just me telling you that based on my experience. There's actual data. There is this NGO called WebAIM, and they create all kinds of resources related to web accessibility. They write articles, they create talks and videos, they also do a screen reader survey, and all kinds of evaluations. And one of these evaluations is called the WebAIM 1 Million. They started it in 2019, and every year they run automated accessibility tests on the top 1 million websites, and they create a report. And one of the things that they shared in the latest report was home pages with ARIA present averaged 70% more detected errors than those without ARIA. 70% more errors if there's ARIA on the page. It almost seems like developers are randomly pouring ARIA on websites, hoping that magically it will turn into an accessible website. On screen you can see a meme of with a chef, and he's holding a comically large bottle of oil and he's pouring it into a salad. And I've labeled the chef full stack developer, the bottle Aria, and the salad in quotes accessible website. So please, if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't know what these ARIA attributes are doing or the role attributes, just don't use them. Just use native HTML. And while we are at the topic, please forget about the role menu and role menu bar and role menu item attributes. You probably don't need them. I'm sure that you will never need them. Forget about them. And again, this is not me saying it. It's in the spec. In the spec, it says, if you can use a native HTML element or attribute with the semantics and behavior you require already built in, instead of repurposing an element and adding an ARIA role state or property to make it accessible, then do so. Complicated sentence, sorry. Use native HTML if possible. No ARIA is better than bad ARIA. That's it. Okay, so eventually, I had to leave the hotel room because shit was getting expensive. I was there for weeks thinking about HTML. I didn't see my family. My daughter was born during that time, but you know, priorities. So I was in the hotel room and I just had to leave, but I left it with this really bad feeling. I had this bad feeling in my stomach because, yes, we're bad at writing HTML, and yes, some of us don't care. It's a minority, but some of us don't care. And yes, we're bad at writing ARIA. But there's something missing. This can't be the end of the story. There must be more. So I had this bad feeling for a long time, and eventually I had to go back to the hotel, and I had to do some more thinking. And I was thinking, but you know, I'm a simple person, and I wasn't able to come up with more reasons. So I did some research. I looked again at the WebAIM 1 million report. And in this report, they have the most common issues, the 6 most common issues they found on websites. So I was looking at that. Let me just quickly read that. So they found low contrast text on 83.9%. And that's not a lot. Missing alternative text for images on 55.4% of websites, empty links on 50.1%, missing form input labels on 46.1%, empty buttons on 27.2%, and missing document language on 22.3% of websites. So these were the most common issues. And I was looking at that, and I was trying to make sense of it and try to understand what these issues mean. And I wasn't the only one. So this report was published, I think, in March or April this year, and other web developers also looked at it and they reacted on these issues. For example, my friend Hile de Vries, he wrote a blog post titled Common Accessibility Issues That You Can Fix Today. And he went through the list and he explained how you can avoid these bugs and how you can fix them. Great article, definitely check it out. I will share the slides later. Or my friend Christian Heilmann, he wrote 1 million broken websites and a way to prevent that. And he goes into how you can use Edge DevTools to find these issues. And I really don't want to criticize them. This is absolutely not me criticizing them, but what they did is what we do all the time. We keep repeating the same basics over and over again, year after year. And they're fighting the symptoms and not the cause. And the problem is, it's really hard to find the cause, because there are probably multiple causes, and that's why I'm here. I'm just thinking out loud. I'm trying to find out why the web sucks so much together with you. So I looked again at the list. And at some point, I was really desperate, and I was also a bit annoyed, so I went again through the list over and over again, and then I was like, okay, low contrast text. I mean, that's avoidable. If you have Figma or Sketch, you have a plugin for that, so you can find contrast issues. And I'm sure that there's probably also a contrast plugin for Word if you're creating designs with Word. I mean, I've received designs built in Word. There are websites, there are apps, there are built-in tools in DevTools, so it's easy to find these issues. Missing alternative text for images. There is an article about the alt attribute written every single week. How many of them do you need? Just use the alt attribute. If the image is presentational, leave it empty. If it matters, if it conveys information, describe it. Empty links. I mean, just add text or use ARIA label. Missing form input labels. From the top of my head, I can come up with 4 different ways of labeling form inputs. Empty buttons, same as empty links. Missing document language. I mean, just add the language attribute. And while I was thinking that, and especially now that I'm saying that, I thought, dude, Manuel, that's pretty toxic behavior. What are you doing? Who do you think you are? You're standing here with your more than 20 years experience of writing HTML, more than 14 years of experience of building websites professionally, more than 6 years of being specialized in web accessibility, and you're telling people just how simple and how easy all that stuff is? No, that's wrong. It's not simple, it's not easy, it's super complicated. And we are wrongfully downplaying the complexity of HTML due to the simplicity of its syntax. And what I mean by that is that it's pretty easy to learn how HTML works, so how to create tags and attributes and so on, and how nesting works. And again, I can say that because I'm a teacher. I have a lot of experience with students. But creating a really good HTML document is incredibly hard. There's so much more to HTML than just tags and attributes. HTML is about structuring content, about conveying semantic information, about creating semantic relations. It's about conveying state. It's about communicating page changes. It's about giving people orientation, allowing them to get an overview, allowing them to navigate. That's super complex stuff. And we're not just working with a single medium. We have multiple browsers on multiple operating systems, different devices. And it's not just people who access a website using a browser. There are also crawlers, like search engines. And there's also software, like screen readers or other text-to-voice software. Super, super complex. So I was again looking at the list. I just kept looking and looking at this list. And then I tried to find similarities between the different types of most common issues. Low contrast text is an exception, but I found something that all the others have in common. And it's that accessibility issues don't just come from what's visible in the design, but from what's not visible. So all the things listed except for low contrast text should be in a document, but they're not necessarily in a design. So when you look at the design, you don't see them, but they should be in a document. And of course, this is really complicated. And let me talk a little bit more about that. So when we take a design and we turn it into code, there are, at least for me, for this talk, there are three phases. And the first one I like to call the exploration phase. This is when you look at the design. You try to get a feeling for the design, for the colors, for the type, for the line height, the line length. You try to understand if there are any tiny details that the designer put in there, like shadows or playful illustrations. You just try to understand how the thing works visually. And once you have that, you try to understand what the things in the design mean. So what are the elements and what kind of information should they provide the user with? And once you understand the design, then you start programming HTML. So that's when you take the things that you see and the things that you understood and you turn it into code. And when we now take the first two things that I said earlier, that we know too little about HTML and that some of us don't care, then this is something that happens between the understanding and the development phase. So if you look at the design and you try to understand it, but you don't know the language really well, it's hard to create a good translation. For example, my parents are from Bosnia. I'm born in Austria. I have mostly Austrian friends. I learned Bosnian, Croatian, Serbian. It doesn't matter, it's the same language. I learned it, but I forgot most of it. So if you give me a text in Croatian and you want me to create a translation, I will be able to create a translation, but it will be a bad translation. Because my vocabulary is limited, I don't know certain places and phrases and idioms and stuff like that, but it will be a translation. And this is the same in HTML. If you don't know all the tags or most of them and attributes and what they do to certain elements, then it's really hard to create a good translation of a design. And you can know as much as you want about HTML, but if you don't care, I mean, the result will also be bad, probably. And if we now take the last thing that I said, so that there are things in a document that are not necessarily visible in a design, then that's something that happens between the exploration and understanding phase. So if I look at the design and there's something I'm supposed to see, but I don't see, it might happen that this thing, wait for it, gets lost in translation. And this can have critical consequences, because if we don't create a proper translation, people might not be able to get a basic understanding of what the page is about. They might not be able to get information or parts of the information. They might not be able to orientate, to understand where they are in the page or in a process, like a checkout process, for example. They might not be able to get an overview, a quick overview of the contents of the page. And they might not be able to navigate. This is really important stuff. We have to get that right, but most of us don't. Okay, I mentioned a friend earlier. His name is Max Böck. He's one of these unicorn developers. Like, he's really good at CSS. He's also good at JavaScript. He writes React, and he's a good designer. So he knows everything, and of course, that's why he's really, really busy. And he was working on a design, but he has no time to turn it into HTML. So he said, Manuel, can you please help me? Can you please ask the Smashing Crowd to take a design that I built and turn it into HTML? So will you help me turn Max's design into HTML? Yeah? Come on. Okay, it's late, it's fine. Okay, this is the design we're working with. He used Figma, it could be any other tool. I will just quickly walk you through the design and what we see on screen, and then we will turn parts of it into HTML, and you will help me. So at the very top, there's this introductory area. You can see his profile picture and his name. There is a navigation, and next to the navigation is this paint roller icon. I don't know, is paint roller the right word in English? I could have looked it up, but just didn't care. Let's call it paint roller, I don't know. Below that, there is this hero area where it says, hi, my name is Max, I make websites, and there's a paragraph about him. And below that, you have the 8 most recent posts with a title and an image. Below that, you have the 4 most commented posts, and below that, you have the 4 most viewed posts. And at the very end, there is an area with secondary links, an area where he brags about his perfect Lighthouse core, and some more links. So, the first thing I want to focus on is this nice little paint roller icon. And what I want you to do now is I want you to try to figure out which HTML you would use for this specific thing. Now, please don't shout it out, just do it for yourself, and I will just quickly explain what the thing does. So there is this icon, you can click it. If you click it, this panel will show up, and in this panel you can select a theme, and then you can close it again. Forget about the panel, I just want to talk about the icon. So, how would you build that clickable icon in HTML? I will show you a few implementations I've seen on websites. The first one, very minimalistic, just an SVG and a path and maybe a circle. It gets the job done visually. So it looks exactly like in the design, but the thing is, it's clickable. And when it's clickable, it means it should be an interactive element. And an interactive element is something that you can click, but also something that you can focus using the keyboard. But you can't focus an SVG. It's not an interactive element. So we need a wrapper element. We need a button. Let's create a button. Now, if we use a div with a class button, it feels like a button, kind of, but actually we didn't change anything because the button doesn't convey any semantic information. It's just there, but it doesn't do anything, doesn't provide any information. So let's turn this into a proper button. Ah, beautiful, button element. And this is so much better because now you can click it, and if you use the tab key and you find the button and you press enter or space, it will also fire the click event. So you get the key events for free with the click event if you put it on a button. And on top of that, if a screen reader user finds this button, it will say button, which is really great. The thing is, it won't tell them which button or what kind of button this is, so we need a label here. One way of labeling it is using the ARIA label attribute. So this is a nice way of giving this button an accessible name. You can see that I'm also using ARIA hidden here on the SVG. This just makes sure that the SVG is completely hidden from the accessibility tree, because we don't need any information coming from the SVG, we just need the button. Another way of labeling a button is just putting text in there instead of the ARIA label. And this is my favorite way of labeling the button, because now everyone can profit from the text here, because it's not just visible to screen reader users, but also to sighted users, to everyone. So everyone knows what the button is about. Yes, but if the design demands it, then you can hide the text, you can wrap it in a span and use a screen reader only class. Unfortunately, there's no native way in CSS to do that, so you have to create a custom class with about, I don't know, 10 properties that just hide the text visually, but still maintain accessibility. That's fine, you can do that. And there are other ways of labeling the button, but let's keep going. So this button is pretty great. It conveys the information, I'm a button, I'm a change theme button, but this button also has one more responsibility. And it opens the panel, and it must also convey the information to the user whether or not the panel is open. So the button tells the screen reader user, is the panel open or is it closed? And we can provide this information by using the ARIA expanded attribute. So a screen reader will now say something like, button change theme collapsed. And when you click the button, you change the value of the ARIA expanded to true, and now it will say something like, button change theme not collapsed. Really great, I love this. This is absolutely awesome. And as you can see, there are many things that were not in the design, but they definitely have to be in the document. If you want to, you can also additionally add the ARIA controls attribute. It creates an additional semantic relationship between the button and the panel. It doesn't work in all screen readers and browser pairings, but yeah, if it doesn't work, it's still fine because the previous solution is also great. So the perfect button for me is a focusable interactive element, so the button element. It has an accessible name, some kind of label, either provided by ARIA label or ARIA labeled by, or actual text, or the title attribute within the SVG. There are many different ways. And it has a correct button role. And sometimes it makes sense to communicate state and relationship. Okay. One more thing. If the panel is open, you can see there's one more button. There's this close button. And the close button is one of the most controversial and most complicated patterns in web development, in all of web development. And I don't know why. One day I took 2 hours and I did some research, and I tried to find different ways of how people create close buttons. And in less than 2 hours, I found 11 different, completely different wrong implementations. And I summarized them in a blog post on the HTML called HTML's Passion Close Buttons. We are really bad at creating close buttons. I don't know why, but it's a fact. One of these bad implementations I see quite often is this one. So now you know this button is pretty awesome because it's a button element, it has ARIA expanded, it has ARIA controls, it has even a text label. The thing is, this label is not an X. If it was an X, I would say, okay, it will probably work. People probably understand that X means close, but that's not an X. That's the icon for times, as in 2 times 2 or 3 times 4. So a screen reader would read something like button times collapsed, or button multiplication sign collapsed, and this doesn't make sense. So if you want to use this glyph, then wrap it in a span, put ARIA hidden on it, this makes it inaccessible, and provide one of the ways of labeling a button that I showed you, or another way. Okay. The next thing I want you to do, I want you to figure out how many headings are on this page. Is there just one heading? Are there maybe 4 or 20? While you think about it, I just quickly want to talk about wild bees. So one day I was lying on my couch, and I was just lying there in this apathetic state, and I was just aging slowly, not paying attention at all, when all of a sudden the voice in the telly said, "The poppy mason bee builds its nest in sandy soil. She digs a 4-centimeter long tube into the ground and uses pieces of poppy petals to line the hole. It's not clear exactly why the bee uses poppy petals." And I was like, she does what? And she puts what where? And we don't know why? How cool is that? And they kept talking about other bees and how they build their nest. So there's a bee that uses a snail shell to build its nest. And they showed even more bees, and I just realized how awesome these creatures are and just how beautiful they are. And at some point I was standing in front of the TV and I was just screaming, "Fuck me, how awesome are wild bees!" So the next morning, the first thing in the morning, I went to the local bookstore and I went straight to the clerk. I didn't say good morning, I just said, "Did you know that the poppy mason bee uses poppy petals to line the hole of its nest? And we don't know why?" And he said, no, what's going on? And I said, I need the best book about wild bees, it's important. He said, okay, dude, shit, I will get your book, wait a second. And then he got me this book, and I said, wow, that's a huge book, I don't know if I want to read all that, that's really a lot. And then I took the book and I opened page 3 because I wanted to know if this is what I want. And page 3 is the index, it's in German, it doesn't matter, but it just gives me an idea of what's in the book, and it will tell me, okay, it's about how they build nests, about they communicate with nature, and also it shows that there is an index about all the bees in Central Europe. And I was like, okay, I want that. That's exactly what I was looking for. So I didn't have to open the book and browse through the book in order to learn what the book was about. I just had to look at the index. And in HTML and in design, we can do the same thing using headings. So if we create a nice heading structure, sighted users can just browse through the page, look at the headings, and get a feeling and an overview for the page and understand how the page is structured and what it is about. And especially screen reader users, they can use shortcuts to just list all the headings of the page. They don't have to interact with the page at all. They can just list the headings and try to get a feeling for the structure. This is really cool. Here's an example. So I'm on the A11Y project website. It's just an example. It doesn't matter. They're just doing a great job. And I'm using the built-in screen reader on macOS Voice over here to list all the headings. And this is how it looks like and sounds like.
Headings menu. Heading level 1, 3 items. A11Y stands for accessibility. Heading level 2, table of contents. Heading level 2, learn the fundamentals and principles behind accessible design. Heading level 3, testing accessibility. Heading level 3, introduction to web accessibility. Heading level 2, conduct an accessibility audit.
So you can see how well that works. They are using an H1, they start with an H1, this is the most important heading. They explain what the page is about. Then for all the larger sections on the page, they use the H2 element. And if there are subsections, they use the H3. So I don't have to interact with the shitty built website. Of course, this is perfectly built, but usually shitty built website. I just press some keys and I get an overview of the page. This is really cool. So if we take Max website, and if there's just one heading, I mean, it's okay, but I kind of see more structure on this website, on this page. So I see an H1, it's probably, hello, my name is Max, I make websites. But there's also the featured posts. It's not visible in the design, but it should be in the document because it's a larger section of the page. Now, if you ask me, I would just show the heading. I wouldn't hide it. But if you want to hide it, just reuse the screen reader only class that we used earlier in the button and put it on the heading. Then I see another heading for the most viewed posts and another heading for the most commented posts. Really nice structure. It's so important that we create a sound document outline. And sound means meaningful labels, so describe each section, describe the page, use a clean hierarchy, so try to avoid skipping headings. So don't start with H2 and then jump to H5, back to H3 and then H6. And use enough but not too many headings, because if everything is a heading, nothing really is. Okay, one more thing. I want you to figure out how many landmarks are on this page. If you don't know what landmarks are and you're writing HTML every day, then please look it up. That's important stuff. Okay, I will tell you how many I see. There's a header. There's a nav, navigation, the main navigation. There's a main landmark. And the footer landmark. And why is this important that we use these landmarks or create these landmarks? Again, because screen reader users have shortcuts they can use in order to list all the landmarks and jump directly into the navigation, for example, which is really convenient. So here's an example on Max websites, again, using VoiceOver.
Landmarks menu.
Okay.
Banner. Navigation. Main. Content information. Main. Navigation. You are currently in a list.
Super convenient. You can just browse through the different landmarks and jump directly into the navigation. As a side note, banner is the role for the header element and content information is the role for the footer element. So it's not header and footer, but banner and content information. Or here's another example. So if you're on the Smashing Magazine website and you read an article and you're using a screen reader and you just want to get an idea what the article is about, you probably want to read the quick summary on every page. And instead of having to go through the whole header and the title and the meta area, you can just use a landmark. So on the Smashing Magazine website, they turned this quick summary section into a landmark. And they did that by using the section element A section element is pretty much a nicer div. It doesn't do anything, but if you label it, so if you use ARIA label on the section element or ARIA labeled by, you are turning it into a landmark. So it will be added to this landmarks menu, and this now means that Screenreader users can directly jump into the quick summary, read what it is about. If it doesn't sound interesting, they just skip this article. Really convenient. But again, if everything is a landmark, nothing really is. So try to keep this list really short. And the next thing is, avoid putting anything synchronous ahead of your title tag. I learned that today in the morning. If you remember, Harry showed us that if you put JavaScript before the title tag, it might slow the rendering of the title tag. This is bad for performance, but also really bad for accessibility, because Screenreader users have this shortcut that allows them to read the title of the page. And this is really important because this helps them orientate. For example, if they're in the checkout process and they want to know on which step they are, step 2 or step 3, or if they're using a really badly built client-side rendered page where JavaScript does all the page changes and there is no announcement whatsoever when a page changes, then it's really helpful if they have this shortcut because it reads them the page title. If the title has changed, so please change your titles on every page, even if you're using JavaScript. Okay. The next thing. We have to define the natural language of this page. Again, it's not in the design, but it definitely has to be in the document. So, for example, when you have a page and it's written in German, you want to use the language attribute on the HTML element and set it to DE, so German. This now means this page is written in German. If we take Max' website, you might be tempted to also use DE because he's from Austria, so this makes sense. But no, you have to use the language the page is written in. Max writes in English, so you set it to EN. And this is really important because the language attribute is incredibly powerful. For example, if a Screenreader user finds a page that's written in English, but the language attribute is set to German, it might happen that the voice switches to a German voice and it tries to pronounce the content on the page in German. So this voice will sound a little bit like me. And you don't want that. You want to hear proper British English or American English, but you don't want to hear my Schnitzel English. The language attribute has an effect on hyphenation in CSS, on quotation marks in your Q and block quote elements, on spell checking, on the default font selection in Chinese, Japanese, and Korean languages, and translation. Here's a beautiful example. 2 years ago in Vienna, we went to the polls to vote for a new municipal government. And the way it works in Vienna is that we vote on a Sunday, and usually at around 5, the first results will be published the same day. So we don't have to wait for 3 or 4 weeks like in other countries. So it's on the same day, and usually the results are published on the largest news site in Austria. And they publish the results, and they split them in districts. We have 23 districts in Vienna. From 1 to 23, and they also have a name. And the results were published, and shortly after, the developers received some bug reports. People said, hey, some of the names in this list are wrong. And the developers looked at it and were like, nope, works on my machine, it's absolutely fine. And then they started digging into it, and they found out that the people complaining were people who were using Google Chrome and Google Translate, and people who instructed Google Translate to automatically translate English content to German. So what happened here is they were using a view boilerplate, and by default the language attribute was set to EN, so to English. They didn't notice it, they published it. Google Translate saw, hey, wait a minute, that's English, so let's translate some content that's English to German. And the 11th district is called Simmering. Simmering is just a name, but in English it means something, to simmer, sieden. So Google Translate translated it to sieden. Then we have the 23rd district, Leasing. Again, just a name. And what I believe happened here is that the Google Translate thought that leasing was a typo, that it meant to say lying, so it translated it to the German word lying, lügen. Yeah, great example. All right. I would say that's great. Max can take over from here and just finish the website. That's enough work for now. And we're slowly approaching the end of my talk, and I want to leave you with some advice. Developers, prioritize HTML. On the next website you are working, on the next component you are working, start with the HTML first and only write HTML. Don't even think about CSS or JavaScript. Write HTML. Try to make it right. Try to make it perfect. And you know what? Then listen to Harry. Use a validator. I use the validator every day. I absolutely love this tool. Because we are human. We make mistakes, and the validator will tell you, hey, you got something wrong. Fix it. And then maybe you even use an automated accessibility tool to find some more issues. And once you have that, you write CSS. And you add more and more layers to your component, to your website. And it did a fantastic job of illustrating how well that works. Progressive enhancement just makes sense. I live by progressive enhancement. Everything I build is progressively enhanced. And then, when you have CSS, you might even add some JavaScript, if it makes sense. And this is probably the most important thing that I'm going to say today. Learn who your users are and how they're using the web. There is no point in fixing accessibility issues if you don't know how they affect your users. If you don't know how people are accessing your website, it doesn't make sense to fix any of that stuff. You have to really understand what kind of hardware and software people are using. And please stop belittling HTML. It's not simple, it's not easy, it's super complex. Universities, school, teachers, course coordinators, prioritize HTML. Teach it properly. Don't just teach the syntax. Teach semantic HTML. Teach accessibility. And if you don't know how, get someone who will teach you how to teach it properly. That's really important. And please rewrite your curriculums. I've seen some of them. They don't work. And I'm especially talking to you, creators of bootcamps who promise people to turn them from zero to front-end ninja in 12 weeks. I know that you believe that React is important. I know that you believe that JavaScript is the most important thing in the world. But it's more important to teach people how to create accessible websites, to create products that allow people to participate in society just like everyone else. Authors, please prioritize HTML. Write and speak more about HTML. Don't be ashamed to talk about HTML. It's not just the basics. I'm speaking about HTML and I feel very confident about my talk and the things that I'm sharing on social media. But if you write about HTML, please don't write one of those shitty, clickbaity, 10 elements you've never seen articles or heard of before. Go on MDN. Pick an element or an attribute and write everything that you can research and you know about this element. It will help others. And even if you're not writing about HTML, if you're writing about CSS or JavaScript, and there might be some HTML in your article, try to make it accessible. Don't just use any element or the div. Make smart decisions. You might even add a side note and explain why you picked this specific element. And learn how to test your sites with automated testing tools. What do you think? On how many percent of websites did they find issues in the WebAIM 1 million report? 10%, 20, 50? Nope. 96.8% of websites had these automatically detected issues. These issues are avoidable. Those are low-hanging fruits, but the important thing is low-hanging doesn't mean low impact. Some of these low-hanging fruits have massive impact on your users and the accessibility, but they're avoidable. You click a button, literally a button in Lighthouse in Chrome. It's built in. You don't have to do anything. You open DevTools, select Lighthouse, generate report. Learn how to test your sites with the keyboard and a screen reader. That would be really great if you did that. Okay, that's enough for today. Thank you so much. I hope that the things that I came up with and the reasons why our websites might be so bad made sense to you. I hope that you were able to learn something new, even though I was just repeating the same basics that I keep repeating all the time. Is there more? Probably. Is there more advice that I can give you? Yes, but not at the moment. I guess I just have to go back to my hotel room and do some more thinking. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Manuel. Good conversation. Oh, we have so many questions.
Great.
So many questions. All right, here we go. I'm just going to go. We don't have that much time, but let's go from just some of them. So first of all, huge thanks for describing the slide. There was a couple of people who wrote no questions, but just thank you for describing every picture in your talk. That's great. Should buttons have cursor pointer or not?
Ooh. No way I'm going to answer that question. No, definitely not. No, I'm not going to answer that question.
You're not going to answer?
No.
You don't want to be, but you have
I
opinions
don't want to talk
on
about
Twitter.
religion.
Okay. Okay, I get that. There is more coming your way.
I don't know, test with your users. There are many different opinions. I really don't have a strong opinion. In this case, I just follow the opinion of really smart people that I respect, who say just leave it as it is. But I would say just test this with your users. Anything that works with your users best is the best way to do it.
Okay. What about using a checkbox for the expand toggle?
A what?
Expand toggle. I guess accordion.
A checkbox? So the checkbox hack. No. See, the thing is that when a screen reader user finds checkbox, they expect that it's an option that they can check and not something that they can toggle open or close. So just the expectations are very different. And it sounds smart and it sounds great that you can do this without JavaScript, but JavaScript is our friend, a really good friend. And sometimes it's just better to use JavaScript for things and not CSS. There's a fantastic article by Stephanie Eccles on Smasher Magazine. I don't know how it's titled, but it's about scenarios where it's better to use JavaScript instead of CSS for certain things.
Okay, this is an interesting question. So there are many different ways of how would you use something like screen reader only content that you would want to display. And at the same time, how would you hide content from screen readers? So when it comes to SR only or kind of screen reader only content, what's the best way to hide content?
So the best way of hiding is to not hide it. Just show content to everyone. That's the best thing you can do. But if you really have to hide it, I mean, this creates a lot of issues, but if you have to hide it, there is this custom class that you have to write. Like I said, there is no native way in HTML. I can share it later. It's like a collection of 10 different properties that just make sure that the content is not accessible using the keyboard and so on, but it's still semantically accessible and not visible. Yeah.
Yep.
And if you want to hide something from a screen reader user, so for example, if there's just presentational content that doesn't convey any important information, you use ARIA hidden and set it to true.
Okay. Also, a question about skip links. Do you still recommend adding a jump to navigation in the beginning of the document? Are the landmarks themselves sufficient?
A big fan of skip links. Skip links are super important. I use them everywhere. No, not everywhere. But I use them at the top of the page, but also for some specific components. So for example, imagine, oh, okay, no, don't imagine, just do it. Just put away your mouse for a day, or an hour. An hour is enough and you'll be so frustrated. But try to put it away and just use the keyboard and try to navigate a website. And soon you will realize how great it is to have a skip link at the very top of the page, because usually you don't just visit a single page, but multiple pages. So if you have a navigation, a logo, or maybe a search in the header, you have to go through all these elements on every single page that you visit. But if there's a skip link at the very top, you can just use the skip link and skip the navigation and go directly to the content. This makes sense for the whole page, but let's imagine you have an interactive map, like Google Maps or OpenStreetMap in your page, and there are multiple markers, let's say 20 of them. And you use a keyboard. What does that mean? You have to go through all the controls within the map and through all the 20 markers until you can access the content after the map. So this is also a situation where you might want to consider adding a skip link before the map, so you can skip the map.
Right.
Or, for example, something that I did with embeddable code pens on my blog posts, I added a skip link before every code pen so that users don't get trapped in the code pen. That was an issue for a long time. And I like to believe that they read my blog post and then they added skip links to code pens. So now they come with every code pen, which is great.
Right. So just a few more questions that came in from me. I have to write them down because I forget them.
We're coming up with
yes.
Yeah.
So one thing that always comes up in conversations about accessibility is that aren't we at this point where we should be getting reliable components out of the box in the browser? For example, you think about date picker, think about file uploading. Should we be relying on dialogue? Should we be relying on the dialogue element, or should we be relying on input type date and just call it a day instead of reinventing custom date pickers all the time? Are we at this point where we can rely on them or not?
It depends. So, for example, I think the dialogue element, I haven't tested it completely, but I think it's pretty reliable. Yeah, it should work. There were some issues, but I think they resolved the issues. Date picker, I mean, it's complicated stuff, but there is work being done by, I don't remember.
OpenUI?
Yes, OpenUI. Thank you. Yeah, so no, it's in the end you just have to test, and if you don't know how to test, you have to just trust smart people who did the testing, or do user testing if you can afford it or if you have the possibilities. But I can't answer this question for all the elements.
Okay, and maybe just
it depends.
Two final questions. One, how would you conduct accessibility testing? How many people do you need to get some insights? That's it.
So if you test with users, yeah. I don't know, we did, for the city of Vienna, we did testing with 10 different people that worked pretty great. I read an article, a super interesting article by Marcy Sutton, where she tested client-side routing with different people, and I think it was also a group of about 10 people, so they should work fine, but I'm not the person to answer that question.
Okay, and if you wanted to fix one thing for good in terms of accessibility, that would be just calling buttons buttons. That would be the only thing that if you wished something on the internet that would be fixing kind of some of the major issues, what would that be?
Pretty much the things that I told you at the very end. So I think there's no point in fixing this one thing. It's just much more important to teach properly, to teach people HTML properly. This is one of the biggest issues we have. I think it's all about education.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Manuel, for sharing your insights. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.